Okay, we'll talk about that. Good question, good question. And there are supply chain angles to that. Okay, anybody else on this side?
India is more focused on manufacturing from IT, so I just want to hear your perspective on
Manufacturing versus IT.
Yeah.
Yeah, great point. Yes. Okay, we don't address that. Please raise your hand and we'll make sure we address it. Okay, anybody else on this side?
I'd like to hear something about infrastructure and what we're doing about the roadways and traffics and trucker strikes and automating customs and getting rid of paperwork and all the usuals of India.
Okay, all right. Okay, good. I think we have some experts up here that can address some of that. All right, let me turn to this side.
Yeah, he kind of took the words out of my mouth, but you know.
We said certain things you have to pick
Yeah,
one.
okay. Infrastructure and how he is building it out.
Infrastructure.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly why I'm sitting right here.
Awesome. Anybody else?
I'm interested in that same context, infrastructure, logistics, what we are in the future direction like that.
Okay, all right. Anybody else?
What are the opportunities?
Where are the opportunities?
Yeah.
We know that we have an entrepreneur in our midst, one who used to run a large organization of entrepreneurs. Okay, I happen to know this young man here for some years. Thank you. So, thanks for that question. Okay, we will try to keep this interactive, and it looks like we've lost our green light, guys, so we'll start anyway. So in the mid-19th century, there was this guy named Frederick Tudor. Anybody know who he was? So, like my friend here, he was an entrepreneur, and he lived in Boston. And one bright winter morning, he had a great idea. He said, there's snow and ice all around. And he said, hey, I bet there's a market for this somewhere. So he started chopping up pieces of the lakes around the Boston and Cambridge area and putting them into ships and sending them to the south. You know, this was before refrigeration, of course, right? So, and he started making a little bit of money doing that. Now you might be thinking, what does this have to do with India? But Frederick Tudor was quite an enterprising guy, and after he had great success in the south, he said, where else can I sell this ice? Looking around the world, you know, where are some of the hottest places in the world people might have some money? And he decided that halfway across the world, there was a country which was also a British colony at that time. And how about if I fill up a shipload of ice and ship it all the way to India? Question?
Yeah. What about Mount Everest? They got a lot of ice, right?
I'm sorry?
Mount Everest, right
A
there.
lot of ice, yes. Okay, good question. So these are great supply chain issues.
Exactly.
So this man packed his hold with sawdust. 40% of the ice melted. Okay. Now, what he didn't realize was that the British Crown had an edict, you know, which said that only the British East India Company is allowed to import and export anything from this country. Right? So the ship docked in Calcutta, which was at that time the capital of the East India Company. East India Company ran the country. You know, here was a company running the entire country. It was known at that time as the most powerful corporation in the world. Okay, so he was trying to get his ice off the ship, and it took him quite a while. But the English rulers of India at that time used to get ice from the Himalayan mountains, and it cost way much more than this ice that came by ship all the way from Boston. Okay. So ultimately, he was able to get them to grant him an exception, and he set up a series of his people set up a series of ice houses in Mumbai, in what was then Bombay, in Calcutta, which is now Kolkata, and in Madras, which is now Chennai. And he made millions of dollars in those years, you know, back 150 years ago, you know, selling ice to India. There's a fascinating book about it. If you want to read more about it, it's called The Frozen Water Trade. It was just published a few years ago. It's available on Amazon. I had a great time reading that when I was researching my book on doing business in India. So supply chain issues around India have been around for a long while. And people have done comments, you know, long before today. We have issues around customs and so on, but this guy was dealing with a monopoly. And the monopoly is regulated by the British Crown, and he was still able to make money.
So you could sell ice to Eskimos, right?
That'll be the sense, that'll be the chapter, that'll be the session for the next year's conference. So what we are going to do, we have a couple of our speakers who have presentations, and the others are simply going to talk, and I'll try and keep the session as interactive as possible. Okay? So I think we're going to start closer to home. Okay. How many of you do business with India now? Okay, a few do. How many of you have an interest in doing business with India if you don't currently? Okay. How many of you are here because you were looking for the Latin America session? Okay, good. So why don't we start close to home? And Don, do you want to share a little bit? All the speakers' bios are in the handout, so I'm not going to read you the bios. Don is with the Port of Long Beach, and since we are at the closest point, I guess, to here at USC, why don't you tell us a little bit about your perspective on supply chain in India?
Okay. Well, I work for the Port of Long Beach. If you look in the San Pedro Bay, which is to the south of here, there's a political line down the middle. The western half is.
Can anybody hear in the back? Take a microphone.
Oh, okay, sure. My wife always says, use your indoor voice. So, is this better? Okay. So, anyway, we have the San Pedro Bay, and right down the middle is a political line, and the left side is that other city, Port of Los Angeles, and then we're in the good Port of Long Beach. And so, as background, I've been with the port for 11 years. I work for Mattel Toys in logistics. So I don't know the trade side, but moving lumps of stuff around the world is kind of my focus of my career. So what I've had a few times where when I'm selling freight, it's been between North America and India. And a couple of trends that might be interesting to start off with is, there was a question about why don't you bring the ice from the Himalayas? It's so close to Mumbai or Delhi, and why are you bringing it all the way around the world? Well, the cost of transportation on water is so much cheaper. It's just unbelievable. And so, but there's always competition between moving product from different parts of the world versus the domestic product that you're competing with. So logistics is important because we're all over here, and the interest today is selling to India. So a couple of the trends that'll be important, I think I'll kick off with, is ships keep getting bigger. And I swore today, I'm not going to bore anyone with PowerPoints, but the container ships that we're getting today are 11,000 or 14,000 20-foot equivalent units of containers, roughly about, so that's about 7,000 truck trailers that come on and off these ships. They're huge. And as the ships get bigger, the key thing is the cost per container goes down substantially. So the people that are going to win, either the ship owners or the ports and the countries that are trading, need to be able to handle these big ships. And so we have this slide. So one of these ships, if you could stand it up, it's as tall as the Empire State Building. And, there's bigger buildings now, but us old guys think of the Empire State Building, where you take 6 380, the super jets, and that's about the same length. So they're huge. And with that is you have to have deep water, you have to have lots of cranes, good labor, and that's what's going to keep areas competitive. And so for India, they're still working on on the major ports on being able to accommodate these ships, because if you can't, you have to use smaller ships to get to places like Sri Lanka is kind of the hub for the area, or Singapore. It increase your costs. So that's going to be a big issue. And then the other thing that I think is the logistical importance is that factories or consumers, they're not all right at the port. They don't want to come down to the port and pick out a TV set and go back home. They want to buy it from the store. or if you're selling grain or products there, it has to go inland. And so the important thing for India is that they're doing a lot of good things, but they have a lot of challenges, and they, along with their rival for manufacturing and things, China, is to have the roads and the rail infrastructure that you can move product that you're trying to bring from India, or as you're selling product, that you can get it to where the population centers are dependably and at the price that's going to work, like our friend with the ice was able to do. And,
do you mind if I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So I looked at the list of the largest ports in the world, and India doesn't figure, I think, in the top 20. I think we're going to see a change in that over the next 10 years as manufacturing in India grows. But my question is around the U.S. government is very concerned about what's coming in through our borders.
Right.
And the risk of, terrorists using cargo to create a problem in the U.S. How is that? I remember a cousin of mine is in the stainless steel business, and one time the whole business stopped because they found some stainless steel from India that was radioactive because somebody had recycled the wrong kind of materials, and it caused all kinds of havoc in the business. But what is the view of the Port of Long Beach on security for goods coming from India?
Well, we're a landlord port, so we build the structure. We don't even operate it. We get experts to operate the terminals. And security, we have our own security force, but the primary function of security is U.S. Customs and Border Protection and the U.S. Coast Guard. And so as you're bringing product in, there are a couple things that are important. U.S. Customs gets comfortable, as we all do, in making decisions with full and perfect knowledge. The more, I remember that from economics, as some guy Smith said that or something, full and perfect knowledge. So what happens as you're importing product from India or wherever is that there is a layered approach to information as well as the physical product. And so you have to have information to customs 24 hours before your cargo loads the ship at the overseas country. And they're making assessments, like they say, oh, it says here this shipment is a thermonuclear bomb. We probably ought to tell them not to load that and leave it in the country there. But they assess that. They also match up the ship's manifest with, if you're importing product, with your documents to say, does it agree? Is this a common shipper? And those kind of things to say, we can only inspect, and they'll never tell you how much they inspect of cargo, but it's roughly 4%. They're going to look at the known shippers, the good information, and they're going to do less inspections than the stuff that's a mystery to them. And then the final thing is, all the containers go through what's called a radiation portal monitor. So if there's anything radioactive, it catches it, and it catches steel sometimes, clay pots, and bananas, believe it or not, are radioactive to some little extent.
Is this ISF you're talking about, this document you have to file, is ISF?
I believe, yeah, and there is kind of an international protocol, but each government can't just go with the international, so they have certain fields of information that they're looking for.
Okay. So I'm going to keep this moving because we started late and we want to try and finish as close to on time as possible. And so we'll soon switch to a PowerPoint presentation from one of our presenters. You might be aware that, maybe or not, because it wasn't in most of the newspapers, that India just got a satellite into Mars orbit. Okay, so it's the third or fourth country in the world to do that, and the first country to do it on its very first attempt. Because that's a supply chain issue as well, right? They got to get the product 200 million miles away, on time, because if they missed the window, it would have sailed right on to Jupiter. And it's been quite an accomplishment. Following that accomplishment is, the Prime Minister of India was at ISRO as this was happening, and he gave a speech to inspire everybody right after that. and shortly after that he gets on a plane, and he's probably on the plane right now because I think he lands at JFK tomorrow. The Prime Minister of India will be speaking at the UN General Assembly and then meeting President Obama and Joe Biden and many others in Washington. And they're puzzled. You saw the Wall Street Journal today. They're having a private dinner for the Indian Prime Minister. The only problem is that he's on a 9-day fast. And the only thing he can have is water and lime juice. Nothing else. Not even orange juice. So this will be this interesting dinner.
So he's a talk more.
Huh?
He's a talk more.
Yeah, but he might be a little cranky, Next, we're going to have Professor Srinivasan from USC, and you're going to hear about onions and cars if my prediction is right.
All right.
You
So
can keep it short and snappy.
yeah, okay. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to USD. The reason they asked me to speak here is that I teach a class for the undergraduates here called Learning International Commerce. It's sort of a 2-unit class, and these people, half the class is talking about global commerce and global strategy, and then we take them to different countries. We go for the undergraduate program. We go to about between 11 and 15 countries every year. So I've been taking these people to India for the last couple of years. Okay, and we go over spring break, and we go and visit a whole bunch of industries, and we also maybe do some sightseeing. So in Mumbai, it was mostly businesses, and then we went to Pune and saw Tata Motors there, and this year we went to Delhi, and obviously we went to the Taj Mahal, and we went to a whole bunch of businesses, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about to get this discussion going. About a couple of different supply chains in India, which are very different and they're very interesting. But and so one of them has to do with the supply chain for automobiles. So to give you some idea, and I'm going to talk about this in an area in which I know what's going on because I'm in touch with some of those people. And the other one is on onion supply chain. Okay. And I'll tell you why I'm talking. You'll soon understand why I'm talking about it. So, to get started, we all know that the India's GDP is rising, and right now it's at number 11, and it's soon going to be, they say, number 3. In 2023, there's been an increase in total factor productivity, lots of savings, investment, and increase. But it's been dogged by high inflation, especially high food inflation, and that's why I want to talk about onions. It's also been having problems with the high current deficit and a high current account deficit, which means balance of payments, between other countries, and fiscal deficits. But after the recent elections, there's been a lot of optimism in India because the new government has been in office for maybe 100 days, 150, 15 days, and they're already projecting a higher growth rate. So there's a lot of optimism. Okay. These two supply chains, auto industry and the onions, the customers are different, the products are different, and influence is different. So the automobile industry, the production last year for passenger vehicles was 3.3 million units. Domestic sales about 2.6 million, and so the exports are increasing. About $59 billion turnover. Okay, but this product is out of reach for most Indians. Okay, and you can see in this the number of vehicles per 100 people, and India is sort of inhabitants per vehicle. So it's kind of very all these countries are advanced. Okay, so most of the Indians autos are out of their reach. Onions, however, everybody has onions. Especially only if you're maybe a particular communities don't eat onions. Almost everybody eats onions. Okay? And I did a quick calculation and found that if you given a price, I chose a particular price because onion prices are very volatile, a low price, that turnover is approximately the same as the auto industry in India. So sort of they're comparable in terms of the revenue generated. Okay. But in terms of the influence, the onion prices, in a sense, make and break governments. So governments will fall if the onion prices go up. Okay. So the supply chain is very vital. Okay. All right. So just to give you an idea, in India, the automobile manufacturing is clustered into maybe 3 or 4 clusters, 3 clusters mainly. When they say clusters, it means that the assembly plants and all the suppliers and first tier, second tier, third tier, all are clustered in a particular ecosystem because it makes it much easier. And so there are 3 of the large ones, and I'm going to talk more about the southern cluster here. And here, so Tata is sort of up here in the east, and and other clusters. But the big ones here in the south, south accounts for about 40% of car production and 60% of car exports. And the sort of market share, if you look at the commercial auto industry, as they call it, the passenger vehicles only account for about 16%, cars account only 16%, 17%. Most of the stuff there, most of the demand is for two-wheelers. Okay. And so companies like TVS Group, they are leaders in two-wheelers. Okay. And then commercial vehicles, you have Ashok Leyland, which sort of makes, and Daimler-Benz, which make these trucks. Caterpillar, which makes earth-moving equipment. Volvo is also on commercial vehicles, tractors, and so on. And in the south, I come from a city called Chennai, and we have there Ford, Hyundai, all these companies, Mitsubishi, BMW, they're all located there. And Hyundai has a whole bunch of plants there.
May I ask you a question on that side? The only one major American auto company was mentioned there, Ford. And I know,
Okay. Ford has one plant in Chennai, but is also building a plant in Sanand in Gujarat, with the home state of the Prime Minister of India. So it's building a plant here. GM has a plant in Gujarat, in Halol. Yeah.
So, just I'm really curious. So you know a lot about the automobiles and onions in India. Are they like a dominant producer or
what?
Globally for automobiles? India?
Well, okay. No, let me give you the figures here. In terms of figures, the export is about 500,000 per year right now. So it's growing. So some of the companies, the reason they are based in Chennai is that it's a port. There are 3 ports there. Okay, and okay, let me go.
It's a small percentage of the manufacturing.
Yeah. So globally, globally, it's kind of the export is a little more than 500,000 units a year. So but it's growing.
Okay.
And the sort of the Renault and Hyundai, half their production is exported in India, and Ford is also exporting. So it's growing, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the sort of obstacles to that. So.
I can add very briefly to that. So Ford actually introduced some models in India before they did anywhere else in the world. And the production of that has been efficient enough that they are using the India factory to export into Africa, into Eastern Europe, and then ultimately the world over. Hyundai makes some models only in India and nowhere else for export. So those 2 companies are probably ahead of many others. But you'll start seeing this with everybody else. Given the push in manufacturing in India.
Yeah, Hyundai has got 3 plants in Chennai and is planning to put one in Gujarat. So it's a big player in India now.
All over the world. Hyundai.
Yeah. So Daimler-Benz has a plant in there in Chennai, in that area, and it's labeled itself Bharat Benz. It doesn't use the Daimler label, and this is joint with a Japanese company. I think it's called Fuso, and most of the production is exported to Africa and Southeast Asia. Okay, so they're also trying to penetrate the Indian market, but it's very difficult because you have Tata and Ashok Leyland and Volvo already entrenched there. So it's a difficult kind of. Okay, so here, a busy slide, but what it says is that all raw material suppliers, so these are the auto companies, assembly plants, and then you have sort of engine component manufacturers, transmission driveline manufacturers, raw material suppliers, electronic and fuel injection suppliers, sheet metal components, all these suppliers are in that ecosystem, and that's why it's in 3 clusters, because there's lots of economies of scale and movement. And the other issue in India, which I think I'll raise a little, is the tax issue. Each state tax regimes are different. So if you are transporting stuff across tax borders, it's a little more complicated. And they are trying to simplify this in the next couple of years to have a national tax structure. Okay. The other reason why this cluster is been so successful is that a lot of academic talent, lots of engineering colleges, lots of it's known for engineering and accounting, a lot of accounting professionals. So it's sort of lots of trained people in this area, and there are 3 ports, and so it's sort of very easy to export. And if you look at this is from a study by Harvard people. So some of the positive factors are English-speaking labor, proximity to ports and airports, lots of engineering schools. Unbelievable the number of engineering schools we have, engineering schools and vocational schools we have that. Negative, power. Okay, the power situation is really bad. Okay, and it's improving now, but that's one constraint in the development. And somebody talked about roads earlier. Roads, the pace of growth has been so fast that the roads and infrastructure haven't yet, kept pace with it. Okay. In terms of firms and strategy, it's an investor-friendly state compared to other states. Okay. It has an auto special economic zone. Okay. Lots of competition there with all these people. So the people are, you get value from your suppliers. Okay. The negative is high tax and tariff rates. Okay. There's a sort of caveat there that in terms of incentives, some of these firms have got tax holidays for maybe 5 years or 10 years. Okay. So they're okay till the tax holiday ends. And after that, they want to move to some other state and get the tax holiday for another 10 years from that state. And that's what's happening in India. Okay. So people set up a plant in Uttarakhand, northern clusters, and they had a tax holiday for 15 years. And now the Indian manufacturers are trying to move to some other state so that they can get a tax holiday there. So it's sort of the tax is a big issue. Okay. Okay. So there's some monopolistic some monopolies in certain kinds of components and so on. Okay. The negative here in terms of factors is R&D. R&D spending has been very low, but now from last year onwards, they've been hiring lots of people from Europe and Japan in the R&D. So they are trying to ramp up R&D. Okay. And one of the Indian companies called Mahindra & Mahindra, they have the R&D center in Chennai. Okay. And so R&D is getting a much bigger slice of the budget than it used to before. Okay.
There was a Harvard study on Mahindra.
Yes.
About their innovation.
Yeah.
And the design of the Scorpio, one of their SUVs.
Yeah. Okay. The other issue here is that what's growing fastest is the two-wheeler segment, not the car segment. Okay. And last year, actually, demand went down, and now it's picking up again. Okay, just to summarize this, what is needed here? Better infrastructure is still sort of people are sort of asking for it. Port connectivity. We have 3 ports, but connecting from the port to these plants, which are about 40, 50 kilometers, it's not so easy. Okay, and there's taxes. Okay, rationalization of the taxes is one big issue here, and I think somebody talked about taxes earlier. I think the people from Price Waterhouse, tax is a big issue here.
Well, it's always an issue everywhere.
And then the big push now is this FDI Make in India. Okay. The other thing which is I didn't want to talk about is the ecosystem. And it's very strange. Ecosystem has to do with for the Koreans, they need Korean restaurants and they need Korean grocery stores. For the Japanese, they need Japanese restaurants and Japanese grocery. For the French, they need French restaurants. And basically, that has been an issue. Okay, and give you it's growing now, the number of Korean restaurants. But to give you an example, when the chairman of Hyundai comes to Chennai, you get a report in the newspapers that he whole plane load carrying 1,000 kg of food, and his chef come landing first. Okay. So in a sense, you could think that I would think that the ecosystem is developed when they don't have to do that, when they don't have to fly food from Korea to India just for the chairman and his support staff. So there's still a ways to go. Okay.
We're talking about opportunities. Kimchi in India. Big
Kimchi.
They got the best Indian food in England.
Huh?
Best Indian foods in England.
Yeah, so that's an opportunity. Okay, let me talk about onions, because this is onions is I would say 95% of the population has it, and the big issue in India, onion supply chain, is every few years the prices go through the roof, sometimes a 100% rise. Okay, and you can see here the retail price of onions. Quintal means 100 kilograms. Okay, that's what it means at the major cities. So, let me talk about the supply chain here. The supply chain basically is that there's certain onion growing regions in India, okay, and the onions have been transported from that region to other parts and cities. Okay, and so here. Near Pune, Maharashtra, this is a big onion growing center, and so you can see the map here. Okay, this is one of the regions where onions are grown, but the major issue has to do with the structure of the supply chain, the way you want to put it. Okay, the farmer gets 8 rupees, okay, and he gets a profit of about 3.8. Right now, the dollar is at about 61 rupees. So you can see 8 rupees a kilo is. How much is that?
8 cents.
Yeah, 8 cents. The consumer, it goes to the consumer at 70 rupees. That's almost a little over $1 per kilogram. The rest is all pocketed by the middleman. Okay, and so this is an issue, and basically, we talk about infrastructure, and as the infrastructure develops, as there are more cold storages and infrastructure, from the onion supply chain point of view, there are more opportunities to hoard these items and speculate on the price rising, and that's what's happening. Okay, and it's really causes a lot of misery, and there's a lot of price manipulation because there's a lot of rules. Then the government says, okay, we have to regulate the price. You have spot prices, okay, but it's difficult to. The middleman tries to manipulate these prices, and so the middlemen are making a killing here. Yeah.
The middlemen, are you talking about like distributors or?
No, okay. You're the farmers, okay?
Right.
So the farmer either sells to a cooperative, okay, or to a trader.
Okay.
And there's some agents, because some of these places are remote, so he doesn't want to cart his stuff to the market, okay?
Right.
And so the agent gets a cut, the trader gets a cut, the trader takes it and takes it to the market and sells it to a wholesaler, and the wholesaler then sells it to retailers so it's a sort of longish supply chain. Okay. And a lot of people get cuts here. Okay. And one of the reasons that traders say that they need this is because they say the onions because of spoilage. Okay. But spoilage has been coming down now because of the cold storage, but still it's a big issue. So let me talk about. Let me show you. Let me give you a couple of headlines to appreciate what's happening here. So regulation here is one of the big things. I don't know how you
Control click.
Just start.
Oh. My God. Anyway, may not wait for. Okay. Okay. Now, so here, I'll just go through this and explain to you. Lots of supply chain sort of solutions or responses. The government says the onion price rise, if it's uncontrolled, people are very unhappy and they vote out the government. So the government is very concerned about it. Okay. So like in last year, the Delhi government went raiding all these shops, 500 shops, 500 warehouses. So they would raid them, get these people and put them in jail, have summary courts and so on, because it's a big issue. Okay, and so there's a law called the Essential Commodities Act. Okay, and so what they want to do is to strengthen this and make this a non-bailable offense, establish special courts, and there are lots of rules here. So this is what's going on, from regulation point of view. The other thing they want to do is to set stock limits on the warehouses and cold storages so that they can monitor them. Okay, and in one state, West Bengal, the chief minister there is such an activist that what she would monitor, and this has been happening for the last few years, the levels in the warehouses, and as the price rises and goes above a particular limit, she will pass an order that all the onions in all the warehouses and all the cold storages have to be out in the open market, in the markets, okay, and then so that's one way of getting the price down. Okay, the other thing they would do is to, at least in the state of West Bengal, you can't ship onions across borders, so it's like prohibition. They check your trucks for onions. Anyway, the other thing is export controls. Okay, export controls means what? The Middle East likes Indian onions. They're very tasty, so they love Indian onions. So what they do is they keep raising the minimal export price, okay, till the demand sort of goes down. And if demand doesn't go down, they say ban it altogether. So these are the responses from the government. Now, what's been happening in the last few years are responses from the marketplace of how to disintermediate, okay, cut the middleman out. Okay, this is a typical supply chain solution. So the first thing they do is vertical integration. So what this means is the cooperatives, what they call it, farmer production companies, which are cooperatives, which procure these onions in a particular state, and the farmers are members of them. They would establish shops in these different cities, okay, and they'll sell directly. So in a sense, both sort of, I would say, not manufacturing, because it's in a sense production, because their members, the cooperative members, are producers. Okay, so the same body controls production and retailing. Okay, that way they want to be able to sort of streamline the supply chain. Okay, so that's one big push now, and this has been just come up in the last couple of years. Okay, so this is a very welcome move. Okay, the only thing is the cooperatives they don't want to take the risk to buy a lot of onions. So what they want the government to do is to have buyback guarantees. That is, if we don't sell it, then you the government, you buy it back at our cost. Okay, so that's the negotiation going on now. Okay. Online marketplace. Okay, and the way the price is arrived at, they arrived at an open market. There's a mandi. Mandi is a market where people bring their onions and then a price is arrived at. Okay, like arbitrage. Okay. But it's not online. It's not as if you have to be there. Okay, so now they are trying to establish an online marketplace. So you could place an order, okay, and that at a particular price, and once it's executed, it's honored. Okay. So that's the other thing they want to do. So it's sort of again trying to get away from going through a third party. Okay. Because what happens? The traders buy from these mandis and then they hoard it and they sell it to the wholesalers and so on. The third thing, the third thing is that some of the governments own these shops directly because they want to win elections. Okay, so they procure directly from the farmer. They have a government fair price shop and they procure directly from the farmer. Also, people are talking about substitutes like dehydrated onions. Okay. But so far, no takers for it. Okay, so some of the opportunities here. Okay, so building cold storages to prevent rotting. Okay, building better rural roads, infrastructure push here, because part of the problem is for the farmers in interior areas is accessibility. And it's not so easy. You have village roads, and that's part of the problem. Better farming practices, better farm credit. The other issue is there's no futures market for onions. There's a futures market for tomatoes. There's a futures market for potatoes, but not for onions. Okay, it's a too volatile issue. There are two commodity stock exchanges in the country, but so far they have stayed away from onions. Okay, and so this is part of the problem. There are spot markets in these mandis, but no forward markets. So if the other opportunity here is if they could develop a forward market, it would alleviate a lot of these problems.
It's probably because of the government. The government doesn't want to enforce it or doesn't implement it. Yeah.
Is there a lot of people want to do business here. They're crying for onions. Can you import onions? We have best onions in the world are in California.
Okay, that's an option. That's an opportunity because in India now, 10 years ago,
or are there barriers to?
Right now there are barriers, but apples, for example, are imported. You see Washington apples in sale in India all over the place. Okay, so that's an opportunity. I mean, if people, Poland is lobbying for their apples to be allowed to be sold in India. Okay, so that's an opportunity. Onions from the U.S.
Very high custom duty, though.
Customs duty.
And we'll get to the customs duties in just a minute.
Any more questions?
So if you want to find out more about onion supply, if you like The Economist, they have, if you do a search on onions in India, they actually followed the path of an onion from a farm all the way to a market in Mumbai not so long ago. And I think it's a really interesting story that shows some of the supply chain challenges in a very, very real kind of sense. And it's written in the typical Economist style. I didn't introduce myself when we started. My name is Gunjan Bagla, and I run a company called Amrit here in Southern California, helping U.S. companies to do business in India. I'm not going to talk much more about my company. The bio is in the handouts that you have. But I did want to mention that if you like the Frederick Tudor story about the ice exports, I'm actually writing a series for the Huffington Post in preparation for the Indian Prime Minister's visit. 2 of the articles are out. The 3rd one is coming out hopefully over the weekend. And so if you want to leave me your business card, I'll send you links to all 3 stories, and I think you might have an interesting time reading about those. And so, I talk about a lot of supply chain related issues there as well. Any questions for Dr. Srinivasan?
Before we move on to the trade zone, I wanted to ask about the Harvard study on the M&M Scorpio.
Yeah, so Anand Mahindra, the current CEO of the Mahindra Group, is a Harvard Business School grad, and there was an article, I don't remember the specific content of it, but they talked about how Dr. Pawan Goenka, who's a former GM, head of GM's technology center some years ago, moved to India and decided that he wanted to design a car from scratch. And it shows really that, everybody else was doing low-cost cars, right? And they went to the other end, a big, bulky, high-end SUV. And it was a tremendous success. So just looking ahead as to what the market could want and creating a design from scratch, I think, don't hold me to the numbers, but I think they spent like $50 or $60 million in designing the entire car. So, which is like 1/10 of what GM would spend.
So the big SUV was a success. I thought mopeds were like the
well, in terms of a new car introduction designed in India, it was a phenomenal success. I'm not saying numbers wise, of course, the two-wheelers sell much more. Okay. And even the Tata Nano, which was at the other end, the volumes are higher. But in terms of what the expectation of the market was and the delivery of an innovative product, that might have been unexpected by people. That's what I'm talking about.
Is that the 6-seater cost?
I'm sorry?
Is that the 6-seater one you're talking about?
I believe so.
Oh,
Scorpio. I think he's talking about Scorpio.
Families, it's sold out pretty well.
Yeah. Several of my friends bought them, and sometimes just for boasting rights.
Fits the family pretty well.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I have one more question. Made in India. You had one bullet point that said Made in India has been something that's getting promoted a lot more. So can you expand on that
Okay,
a bit more?
it's called Make in India. This is a talk which the Prime Minister gave 2 days ago. So what he wants to do is to cut the red tape. That's the main thing in his. So he wants to make. He calls. His call is in his visit to the U.S. He's going to talk with CEOs to come and to ask them to come and invest in India. So this is a new policy which has come up with. In this central government, they can give incentives, okay, but really the action has to also be followed up in the state governments because they're the ones. The big issue is land acquisition, okay, and it's the details of what he wants to do are still not clear because land acquisition is a big hurdle in India. He has set up a committee, a task force on this, and hopefully we'll be hearing more about it. But he just started this Make in India 2 days ago. He announced this policy, and he wants it to become a manufacturing powerhouse because I think in terms of percentage of GDP, the Indian it's not even 10% in manufacturing. Okay, it's mostly services.
What are the biggest parts of India's GDP?
Services, agriculture, and services.
Okay,
those are the two big things.
Cool. Okay.
So, everybody thinks about call centers and IT and they think about India, but call centers and IT probably employ less than 10 million people in a country of 1.25 billion.
How many people are employed in the country? What percentage of the 1.2 billion?
So total employment, well, that depends on how you define employment.
We don't need Let's get
so the issue that the government faces today is that they have to create somewhere around 100 million new jobs. Right? That's not going to happen in IT. It's not going to happen in services. And so the push is towards manufacturing. Now, Narendra Modi has a unique qualification. He's the first chief minister, which is like a governor of a U.S. state. He's the first chief minister to become prime minister. So when he speaks about incentives and land reform and so on, he's not speaking theoretically. It's something that he did in Gujarat. And those of you who are familiar with India, if you've traveled to Gujarat in the last 10 years, you've witnessed the transformation that has happened in that state. It's not Shanghai-like transformation with high-rises. It's really secular and spread across the state in dozen cities that are growing very fast. And my guess is that out of India's 29 states, probably 20 of them won't follow this lead. But if even 6 or 7 of them do, you'll see India's GDP starting to grow at 10%.
The reason he's pushing it is they won a few states, so now they can implement the policy there. So he can implement good, cut the red tape. He can have a better land acquisition policy and so on. Yeah.
Well, the reason I was asking more so is because I attended the World Bank meeting last year in D.C. and ran into some folks for Import-Export Exim Bank, and what I was told is that as long as things are manufactured even by a U.S. brand in India, funding is actually supported as long as they can increase the exports coming out of India. So India, banks were actually investing in companies and brands that are going from the U.S. As long as they're manufacturing products, exporting them back to the U.S., India was ready to fund it in some shape or form.
Just comment on red tape and all of those things. I think land acquisition is one part of that equation, but it's probably not such a big part as everything else that follows it. So we went and set up an IT infrastructure there within a government-owned SEZ, Special Economic Zone, SEZ or SEZ, and from the time we actually wrote the check to acquire, this was five years ago, we actually got the title to the land 3 years after we wrote the check. We started construction after that. So this is 100,000 square feet. And it took us 18 months to go through that whole process. In this special economic zone, we had to get environmental clearances for what would typically be required for a manufacturing facility. But we are an IT services place. So you got all these arcane rules and regulations which are all exist primarily to create the kinds of obstacles that force you to deal with local bureaucrats.
California's got similar.
Well, no,
Let's move on. I want to be sure that our other panelists have a chance.
all I wanted to say is, he's talking about IT, but in capital goods, you got to transport it from one state to another, and that's another level of bureaucracy. Octroi duty and this
Octroi duty, yes.
And I really want to
He's
take
an
that
expert on
question
this.
next. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So what we'll do is, instead of the next presentation, I really want to turn to my friend Raj here to talk about duties and octroi and customs. And anybody exporting goods to India? Okay, so you know that they have basic custom duty, they have countervailing duty, they have excise tax,
they have all kinds of duties.
And when they ran out of duties and taxes, they invented another word. I had to look it up. It's called a cess. The education cess. It's no different from a tax, but it sounds sexier if you call it a cess. Okay. So tell us how you navigate all of that.
Yeah, Raj Diaz with DGX, and I wanted to actually talk about some personal experiences of when this happened here in 2014. One is the GST, which we just spoke, which will be implemented. I mean, that's one of the priorities for the Prime Minister. When you talk about, opening up new companies in India, that's one of his priorities. Is because of if they implement GST, which is a type of VAT, goods and service tax, it will also take out the double duty and double taxation. So that's part of the implementation, what they will have. So it's on the card, that's one of the priorities on the Prime Minister. In fact, I have a copy of his itinerary and what he's going to discuss on the points in Washington. But that is one of to attract foreign direct investment. It has a direct impact on the GST, so which will be implemented. The other point is, Kunjal, if it's okay, is just open DGX in India in 2014, the company. So if you all are going to open a company in India, 100% foreign company is follow every rule that is required by a tax consultant and the forms that need to be filled out. It took us exactly 54 days, which is actually very good for a foreign company to open and establish in India. And the reason is that to do it by the book, cross every T, dot the I, don't put any extra word in. If you all are. Two is that the new Company Act law that came out that you have to describe your business with the name of your company. So that was a shocking thing because I said I'll open DGX, which is Dependable Global Express, but they wanted to identify the business to the company name. So when you go to India, think about that. So we had to open DGX Logistics India Private Limited. So these are just points that I wanted to. This happened now in 2014.
Yeah,
So
these
these are
are
things.
negotiable though, because our client Paramount Farms, they're the world's largest grower of pistachios. They submitted their names in India, and the government came back and said, "No, you got to call the company Paramount Wholesale Nut." And my client had a hearty laugh. He said, "There's no way on earth I'm going to use that name." And we finally came up with a sensible name that the government agreed to. But some bureaucrat in Delhi got to fill out some paperwork and object to things. But 54 days is pretty darn good.
It is because if you follow the forms exactly.
He hired consultants.
No, I knew somebody there. No, no, but if you really document everything exactly at what is requested by the tax guys, you can get. But if the moment you put an extra word in, it's a nightmare even with the banks. So
That's
do it.
formation. They get into transfer pricing.
Transfer pricing. That's after 3 years.
So you mentioned banks. How are banks in India in general?
Pretty flexible.
Very bureaucratic. It takes 54 days to open a bank account sometimes.
Yeah, if it's 100% foreign investment, it does.
Let me present a contrarian viewpoint as well. My entire life is spent doing business with India for our clients, and it's true there are tremendous barriers. Okay, but it's because those barriers are unfamiliar that we complain about them here sitting here in Los Angeles. Okay, you don't have to deal with workers' comp like you do in this country. You don't have to deal with product liability like you do in this country.
Yeah,
if you want to set up any kind of sensible company here in Los Angeles, guess where it will be incorporated? I bet not in California. You'll set up a Delaware corporation.
Absolutely.
All of this nonsense that we are completely used to in this country doesn't exist in India, right? You set up a company,
Oh,
it
we're
doesn't
not
matter where you set it up. You can operate in the entire country or all 29 states.
Oh, it gets old.
India went to digital signatures well before many American states did. Right? So there's huge problems there, don't get me wrong. But where there's not a problem, we don't tend to see.
No, yeah, I'm just trying to get like a good, even talk about onions, automobiles. Like, what is so? Okay, there's just regulations. We talk about China. You can generalize whatever. They're communists-ish. What would you call India? India's government. And what are their goals?
So I'm not the first to say this, and I think everybody here will probably agree with me. That for every truth that you can say about India, I can make a case for the equal and opposite truth.
Say.
For anything you can say that is true about India, I can also say exactly the opposite, and it would also be true.
So it's just like all over the place?
Yeah, you've got to be careful. You've got to interpret and choose your truths carefully. If you're going to go to India and do business in Bihar or in Jharkhand, you may have a little more difficulty than if you go to Gujarat or Tamil Nadu.
I got to talk to his tax guy.
Now, I have, my companies have bank accounts in India, and when we pay our people in India, one thing Indian businessmen understand better than anyone else in the world is cash flow. And in Indian banks, when you make the transfer from one account to another, it happens in hours. Here at Wells Fargo, sometimes I have to wait until the next day or 2 days later, right? And these systems were implemented 5-6 years ago in India. Okay, it's a little cumbersome. You have to change your password every third day, and sometimes it doesn't work. But when it works, bang, it's like the money is there in 35 minutes sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah. It's a work in progress, right? But soon enough, all these things will be sorted out. Right? Soon enough. And with the new government in power, I think you're going to see an acceleration in all of these.
And you said the new prime minister, he came from the public sector.
No, he was the governor of the state of Gujarat, chief minister
So
of politics in India.
He came from.
Yeah, he's been in politics all his life.
Okay.
One of the questions you asked, I think you also implied something that you were perhaps too polite to say about how well Raj was connected. And so I asked all the ugly questions. So did you have to pay anybody to make this happen?
No, I just went by the book.
You just went by the book.
Good answer.
No, but the other opportunity for India.
Just comment about the truth. There's always
another side of it. But is coming back to the opportunity, what the professor was saying about onions is that in the logistics side and supply chain is that the big opportunity is the cold chain. The India infrastructure is out of every 10 trucks that carry produce to the market, 4 is destroyed. So there's not enough infrastructure to carry, and that's one of the biggest opportunity is in the cold chain today, and that's one of the on the list for the Prime Minister's visits to the U.S. is on the cold chain. So that could be an opportunity.
Refrigerated trucks?
Yeah.
The whole thing, all the way.
So
on this note, I think we saved the best for last because Hussain has come all the way from Mumbai, which is India's largest city, and he was here last year as well. So welcome back.
Thank you.
Let's
after listening to all these gloomy stories about India, I want to give something more happier.
We have to. If you can make a presentation in about 7 minutes or so, that would be great. I'll still leave some time for questions.
So we were talking about infrastructure.
Yes.
Okay. This? Yeah.